All rise, veuillez vous lever. The International Criminal Court is now in session. L'audience de la Cour pénale internationale est ouverte. Please be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir.
Yes, Mr. Could the court officer call the case, please?
Good morning, Madam President. This is the situation in Darfur, Sudan, in the case of the prosecutor versus Ali Muhammad Ali Abd-Al-Rahman, Ali Kushaib. Case reference ICC 0205 0120, and for the record, we are in open session.
Appearances, please, for the prosecution. Yes, Mr. Khan.
Madam President, Your Honours, my name's Kareem Khan, prosecutor of the ICC. I'm joined by senior trial lawyer Julia Nichols, who sits behind, Claire Sabatini, who's to my left, Edward Jeremy, who's right at the back, Laura Morris, and just to the back and the left, Mr. Pupadu Sachitan Andan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khan. Yes, appearances for the defence, please.
Bonjour Madame la Présidente, bonjour Mesdames les juges. En plus de Monsieur Abd-Al-Rahman qui est présent derrière moi dans la salle ce matin, j'ai l'honneur de présenter Madame Eva Kalb, Madame Camille Divet et Madame Paola Palo, qui sont assises à ma gauche et qui sont présentes en tant qu'assistantes en charge de l'analyse de la preuve. Sur le rang derrière moi, Monsieur Ahmad Issa, qui est notre gestionnaire de dossier, Madame Vanessa Gray, qui est notre conseillère juridique, à ma droite, mon excellent confrère Yann Edwards, conseil associé, et je suis Cyril Lauchi, conseil principal. Je vous remercie.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lauchi. Then for the victims' representatives, please.
Yes, good morning, Madam President, Your Honours, dear colleagues. The common legal representatives of victims are represented today by my colleague Nasser Amin Abdallah, who is joining us remotely. To my right, Associate Counsel Anan Shah. Behind me, our case manager Idris Anbari, and myself is Nathalie von Wistinghausen. Thank you very much. I agree, I can't see him on the screen, but he should join any moment. He's attending remotely, that's for sure.
Anybody appearing from registry? No. Right. Then can I start by briefly, for the purposes of the case, deal with the background. On the 27th of April 2007, the court issued a warrant of arrest against Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman. A second warrant of arrest was issued on the 16th of January 2018. Mr. Al-Rahman surrendered himself to the court and made his first appearance on the 15th of June 2020. And pre-trial chamber 2 confirmed the charges against Mr. Al-Rahman on the 9th of July of 2021. And it is those charges that are now before the chamber. Rule 134(2) requires me to say the following. During the first status conference before this chamber, on the 8th of September 2021, the chamber set the date for commencement of trial and the deadlines which applied. The chamber set the deadline of the 3rd of December 2021 for for the filing of any motions requiring resolution prior to the commencement of trial. Having noted this rule, the Chamber will now ask the parties whether, save for any pending requests before the Chamber, they have any remaining objections or observations concerning the conduct of the proceedings which have arisen since the confirmation hearings. In accordance with Rule 134.2, no such objection or observations may be raised during the trial proceedings without leave of the Chamber. I will start this time with the defence. Mr. Lauchi, anything you want to say?
Merci Madame la Présidente. Tout ce que nous avions à dire et écrire est déjà dans nos écritures.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Khan?
Not from the prosecution. Thank you.
And from the legal representatives of the victims?
Nothing from us, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, we will now proceed to the reading of the charges. Before we do so, Mr. Lauchi, could you confirm that you are content that a summary of the charges are put to Mr. Al-Rahman?
Absolutely, Madam President.
Thank you. In accordance with Article 64(8)(a) of the statute, the charges will now be read to the accused, following which Mr. Al-Rahman will be afforded an opportunity to make an admission of guilt or to plead not guilty. And I will ask the court officer to read those charges.
Thank you, Madam President. The counts of the charges against Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman are as follows. Count 1. Intentionally directing attacks against the civilian population of Kudum and Bendisi and surrounding areas as a war crime between 15 and 16 August 2003, pursuant to Article 8.2e, subparagraph 1, and Article 25.3b, inducing off the Rome Statute. Count 2. Murder as a crime against humanity, concerning 51 persons listed in Annex 1 who were killed in Kudum, Bendisi, and surrounding areas between 15 and 16 August 2003, pursuant to Article 7.1a and Article 25.3b, inducing off the Rome Statute. Count 3. Murder as a war crime, concerning 51 civilians not taking direct part in hostilities, or persons hors de combat who were at the material time in the power of the militia, Janjaweed, or GOS forces listed in Annex 1 between 15 and 16 August 2003 in Kudum, Bendisi, and surrounding areas, pursuant to Article 8.2c, subparagraph 1, and Article 25.3b, inducing off the Rome Statute. Count 4. Pillaging as a war crime in Kudum and Bendisi between 15 and 16 August 2003, pursuant to Article 8.2e, subparagraph 5, and Article 25.3b, inducing off the Rome Statute. Count 5. Destruction of property of an adversary without military necessity as a war crime in Kudum and Bendisi between 15 and 16 August 2003, pursuant to Article 8.2e, subparagraph 12, and Article 25.3b, inducing off the Rome Statute. Count 6. Other inhumane acts as a crime against humanity in Bendisi and surrounding areas between 15 and 16 August 2003, pursuant to Article 7.1k and Article 25.3b, inducing off the Rome Statute. Count 7. Outrages upon personal dignity as a war crime in Bendisi and surrounding areas between 15 and 16 August 2003, pursuant to Article 8.2c, subparagraph 2, and Article 25.3b, inducing off the Rome Statute. Count 8. rape as a crime against humanity, concerning 16 Fur women and girls listed in Annex 1 in Brindisi and surrounding areas between 15 and 16 August 2003, pursuant to Article 7.1g and Article 25.3b, including of inducing of the Rome Statute. Count 9. Rape as a war crime, concerning 16 Fur women and girls listed in Annex 1 in Brindisi and surrounding areas between 15 and 16 August 2003, pursuant to Article 8.2e subparagraph 6 and Article 25.3b, inducing of the Rome Statute. Count 10. Forcible transfer as a crime against humanity, concerning the expulsion of Fur persons lawfully present in Kudum and Brindisi between 15 and 16 August 2003, pursuant to Article 7.1d and Article 25.3b, inducing of the Rome Statute. Count 11. Persecution as a crime against humanity on political and ethnic grounds, concerning the predominantly Fur population of Kudum, Brindisi, and surrounding areas perceived as belonging to or being associated with or supporting the rebel armed groups by way of the criminal acts listed in counts 1 to 10 between 15 and 16 August 2003, pursuant to Article 7.1h and Article 25.3b, inducing of the Rome Statute. Count 12. Torture as a crime against humanity, concerning a large number of Fur men in Mukjar police station between late February and early and co-perpetration, and Article 25.3b, inducing of the Rome Statute. Count 13. Torture as a war crime, concerning Fur men in Mukjar police station between late February and early March 2004, pursuant to Article 8.2c subparagraph 1 and Article 25.3a, direct perpetration and co-perpetration, and Article 25.3b, inducing of the Rome Statute. Count 14. Other inhumane acts as a crime against humanity, concerning Fur men in Mukjar police station between late February and early March 2004, pursuant to Article 7.1k and Article 25.3a, direct perpetration and co-perpetration, and Article 25.3b, inducing of the Rome Statute. Count 15. Cruel treatment as a war crime, concerning Fur men in Mukjar police station between late February and early March 2004, pursuant to Article 8.2c subparagraph 1 and 25.3a, direct perpetration and co-perpetration, and Article 25.3b, inducing of the Rome Statute. Count 16. Outrages against personal dignity as a war crime, concerning Fur men in Mukjar police station between late February and early March 2004, pursuant to Article 8.2c subparagraph 2 and Article 25.3a, direct perpetration and co-perpetration, and Article 25.3b, inducing of the Rome Statute. Count 17. Murder as a crime against humanity, concerning the 49 persons listed in Annex 1 outside of Mukjar between late February and early March 2004, pursuant to Article 7.1a and Article 25.3a, co-perpetration, and Article 25.3b, ordering and or inducing of the Rome Statute. Count 18. Murder as a war crime, concerning the 49 persons listed in Annex 1 outside of Mukjar between late February and early March 2004, pursuant to Article 8.2c subparagraph 1 and Article 25.3a, co-perpetration, and Article 25.3b, ordering and or inducing off the Rome Statute. Count 19. Attempted murder as a crime against humanity concerning 2 detained Fur males outside of Mukhtar between late February and early March 2004, pursuant to Article 7.1a and Articles 25.3f and 25.3a, co-perpetration, and Articles 25.3f and 25.3b, ordering and or inducing off the Rome Statute. Count 20. Attempted murder as a war crime concerning 2 detained Fur males outside of Mukhtar between late February and early March 2004, pursuant to Article 8.2c, subparagraph 1, and Articles 25.3f and 25.3a, co-perpetration, and Articles 25.3f and 25.3b, ordering and or inducing off the Rome Statute. Count 21. Persecution as a crime against humanity on political, ethnic, and gender grounds concerning Fur males perceived as belonging to or being associated with or supporting rebel armed groups by way of the criminal acts listed in counts 12 to 20 in Mukhtar and surrounding areas in late February, early March 2004, pursuant to Article 7.1h and Article 25.3a, direct perpetration and co-perpetration, and Article 25.3b, inducing and or ordering off the Rome Statute. Count 22. Torture as a crime against humanity concerning between 100 and 200 Fur males in Delay between 5 and 7 March 2004, pursuant to Article 7.1f and Article 25.3a, direct perpetration and co-perpetration, and Article 25.3b, inducing off the Rome Statute. Count 23. Torture as a war crime concerning between 100 and 200 Fur males in Delay between 5 and 7 March 2004, pursuant to Article 8.2c, subparagraph 1, and Article 25.3a, direct perpetration and co-perpetration, and Article 25.3b, inducing off the Rome Statute. Count 24. Other inhumane acts as a crime against humanity concerning between 100 and 200 Fur males in Delay between 5 and 7 March 2004, pursuant to Article 7.1k and Article 25.3a, direct perpetration and co-perpetration, and Article 25.3b, inducing off the Rome Statute. Count 25. Cruel treatment as a war crime concerning between 100 and 200 Fur males in Delay between 5 and 7 March 2004, pursuant to Article 8.2c, subparagraph 1, and Article 25.3a, direct perpetration and co-perpetration, and Article 25.3b, inducing off the Rome Statute. Count 26. Outrages upon personal dignity as a war crime concerning between 100 and 200 Fur males in Delay between 5 and 7 March 2004, pursuant to Article 8.2c, subparagraph 2, and Articles 25.3a, direct perpetration and co-perpetration, and Article 25.3b, inducing off the Rome Statute. Count 27. Murder as a crime against humanity concerning the 34 persons listed in Annex 1 in Delay and surrounding areas between 5 and 7 March 2004, pursuant to Article 7.1a and Article 25.3a, direct perpetration and co-perpetration, and Article 25.3b, ordering and or inducing off the Rome Statute. Count 28. Murder as a war crime concerning the 34 persons listed in Annex 1 in Delhi and surrounding areas between 5 and 7 March 2004, pursuant to Article 8.2c subparagraph 1 and Article 25.3a, direct perpetration and co-perpetration, and Article 25.3b, ordering and or inducing off the Rome Statute. Count 29. Attempted murder as a crime against humanity, concerning 12 detained Fur males in Delhi and surrounding areas between 5 and 7 March 2004, pursuant to Article 7.1a and Articles 25.3f and 25.3a, co-perpetration, and Articles 25.3f and 25.3b, ordering and or inducing off the Rome Statute. Count 30. Attempted murder as a war crime concerning 12 detained Fur males in Delhi and surrounding areas between 5 and 7 March 2004, pursuant to Article 8.2c subparagraph 1 and Articles 25.3f and 25.3a, co-perpetration, and Articles 25.3f and 25.3b, ordering and or inducing off the Rome Statute. Count 31. Persecution as a crime against humanity on political, ethnic, and gender grounds concerning Fur males perceived as belonging to or being associated with or supporting rebel armed groups in Delhi and surrounding areas between 5 and 7 March 2004 by way of the criminal acts listed in counts 22 to 30, pursuant to Article 7.1h and Article 25.3a, direct perpetration and co-perpetration, and Article 25.3b, ordering and or inducing off the Rome Statute.
Yes, thank you very much, Court Officer. Mr. Lauchi, could you please confirm that you've explained the nature of the charges to Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman and that he has the right to plead guilty or not guilty to all the charges?
Madame la Présidente, cela a été expliqué.
Thank you, Mr. Lauchi. Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman, would you rise, please? Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman, do you understand the nature of the charges which have been read to you today?
نعم.
Do you wish to plead guilty to any or all of the counts?
ولا واحد من التهم يعني ما كله يعني مرفوضة عندي ولا متهم فيها. أنا بريء منها جدا. ليس متهم.
Yes. Yes, thank you, Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman. You can sit down again. Yes, we'll now move to the opening statement, first of all from the prosecution, followed by the legal representatives for victims, and then, as I understand it, the accused wishes to make a short address to the court. Yes. Mr. Khan.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Madam President, Your Honours. These are the first few days of the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, in which millions of Muslims throughout the world, including in Sudan, abstain from food and drink between dawn and dusk. They look forward to breaking the fast in the evening, an occasion called iftar. There has been another fast that they have been partaking, not because of their choice, but it's the fast waiting for justice. And from that perspective, this is a momentous day. It is an iftar of sorts for the millions of Sudanese throughout the world that have been yearning for this day to come, and for independent and impartial judges of the International Criminal Court to start a process of deliberations, of hearing evidence, weighing evidence, to assess criminal responsibility. This, of course, was the first situation referred to the ICC by the United Nations Security Council on the 31st of March 2005. This, of course, is the first trial arising out of that situation. And in a critically important moment, the Council found that the situation in Darfur represented a threat to international peace and security. During the course of this trial, Madam President, Your Honours, you will see that was a very prescient and necessary and well-judged determination with respect by the United Nations Security Council. The information and the allegations that were in the public domain as of the 31st of March 2005 were legion: rapes against women and girls, children being targeted and attacked and abducted, men and boys, amongst others, being executed and killed, homes being wantonly destroyed, people fleeing with nothing, for many, their lives never to be the same again. On the 18th of September 2004, the United Nations Security Council formed and established a commission of inquiry to look at the events that were increasingly well known. And in January 2005, they reported, and they found at that time that there'd already been, early on, 1 million internally displaced persons and more than 200,000 refugees. And that number, tragically, for so many, only burgeoned. It only increased over the coming years. Your Honour, Madam President, and Your Honours will hear a whole spectrum of evidence in the course of this trial in support of the 31 charges to which Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman Ali Kushayb has pleaded not guilty just now. And I'm not going to repeat all of that that my learned colleagues for the prosecution will say after me. But with your leave, I would wish to emphasize children. For far too long, for far too often, they are the invisible casualties of war, conflated with the civilian population or just ignored. But the effect on them is profound. It was profound, and it remains profound, and it remains lasting. 17 years have gone by, and those that witnessed crime, tragedy, hemorrhaging of their family life and their village life and their community life have grown up. But life is not the same by any metric. An example of the scale of the tragedy for children is evidenced by a number of factors. Firstly, most fatalities amongst the children were those that were under 5 years of age, the most innocent, the most vulnerable members of humanity. You will hear in the course of this trial, Madam President, Your Honours, from many witnesses, and we will do our best as the Office of the Prosecutor to highlight the effect these crimes have had on children and how children were directly targeted. But witness P087 gives a flavor of the tragedy that occurred. And I quote what the witness says. You will hear the witness say, "I saw two corpses. One boy was breastfeeding from his mum while she was dead. They were shot with ammunition." And when the investigator asked for clarification about what he meant, the witness continued, "This little boy his mum was dead, and he was breastfeeding from her. His age should be 4 or 5 months." That is simply one example of the human tragedy that Your Honours will be listening to in the course of this trial and adjudicating whether it is true and whether Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman is responsible for that and other crimes. Even those that fled didn't leave to safety. So many endured unimaginable hardship trying to flee with their lives. You will hear another mother describing the anguish as a 10-month-old child died of dehydration and malnutrition after fleeing from their home. A witness, P0834, will say, and I quote, "My son of 10 months died while we were in Mukhjar. He was sick, and while fleeing, I could not feed him enough. It was raining a lot, and he had diarrhea. Many children of a young age, as well as elderly people and pregnant women, died during this time due to the harsh conditions they had to live under. A young man from the village of Cascadi describes walking for days after an attack. He was accompanied by terrified women and children. And P0850 will say, and I quote, "We were exhausted and extremely hungry and thirsty. Our feet were cut and swollen as we were walking barefoot. My clothes were infested with lice. The children could no longer walk, requiring them to be carried. Mothers did not have enough clothes to cover their babies." Again, in a snapshot, Madam President, it shows this caravan of people fleeing an attack, feet cut as they're trying to limp to some kind of safety, but an absolutely uncertain and unpredictable future. Your Honor, there's many examples of this, and again, I'm raising it deliberately to highlight the plight of families. The next example, P943, these are not by any stretch of the imagination military people, combatants, legitimate targets. P0943 is a mother that describes in somewhat pathetic terms, if I may be permitted to describe it in those terms, of an ability to provide shelter for the many, many young children that she was traveling with. She says, and I quote, "My family and I spent 3 days in the forest. It was very hard. It was raining a lot, and we had nowhere to go, so we stayed under trees. There were janjaweed behind us and in front of us. At this time, I was with my older sister and her 6 children. They were all minors, and my sister was pregnant. My brother's wife and her 4 children were with us. The children were all minors. My younger brother and my mum were also with us." Madam President, this was a modern-day exodus, this creeping tide of humanity, terrified, trying to flee with their lives. As we see around the world today, unfortunately and tragically, conflicts, east and west, north and south, it's all too easy to forget why the Security Council referred this matter to this court. Many watching may not even remember what occurred in Darfur. And for that reason, Madam President, with your leave, I wish to show a montage of different video clips. I'm extremely grateful, in fact, to my learned friend, Mr. Lauchi, for agreeing that these could be played. And I want to emphasize they're not being presented for the truth of their contents. It's not evidence. It's simply to provide context as to what was in the consciousness, what was in the mind of the members of the Security Council that compelled such an eventful referral to this court. And I'll start, if I may, with a video from Global News, which is a major Canadian broadcast. Now, some of these clips may seem to be disjointed, but what they perhaps show is that by the time the Security Council referred the matter, there was ample opportunity, every opportunity, I would say, for those individuals who had guns and arms and aeroplanes to cease and desist, to put humanity first, not power, not politics, and certainly not prejudice and persecution. And yet, the repeated pleas from a whole variety of actors that you will see in a moment fell tragically for the millions of Sudanese and Darfuris on deaf ears. So perhaps we could play first Global News from 2003.
Security developments to tell you about in Sudan, where some say a genocide is unfolding. The UN is giving the Sudanese government 30 days to disarm Arab militias accused of widespread atrocities against non-Arab groups in the Darfur region.
Madam President, Your Honours, very briefly, we'll move straight to the next clip. It's from Darfur Now. It's a documentary produced in 2007, but it's very clear from the documentary that the clips we're about to show relate to 2003 and 2004, and perhaps that could be played. I will then seek to show two additional clips. They're prepared, in fact, by the United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Assistance in 2004. The first will show just a sample, really a fleeting glimpse of the variety of means used as part of the pogroms against the Darfuri people. You'll see Anatov planes dropping bombs, and then also we'll see from the ground the village and the towns that were affected, and perhaps those two clips could be played now.
أيها الأخوة المشاهدون شاهدوا قناة الأنتلوب هذه المدينة إنه مدينة كارنوي تحترق تحت دانات الانتنوف. أيها الأخوة المشاهدين هذه أثر الضربة التي خسفت هذا المكان وكما تشاهدون هذا المنزل مشتعلا.
Entire villages and towns now stand empty, while scores of villages have been destroyed by the militias, or the Janjaweed as they have become collectively known. Houses have been burnt, livestock stolen, and children abducted in a scorched earth policy that has sparked a mass exodus of people.
Madam President, you'll see, even from those few seconds, the bit of the landscape of Darfur, the very often arid ground, the very frequently very simple buildings, and some of the people, the Darfuri people that were affected. They have shown since antiquity, a remarkable resilience to work that land, to have the stamina to survive in those inclement conditions. What prized them away from their land were not the elements or the soil or the climate. It was a deliberate targeting of them for multiple reasons, but principally in this case you'll hear because of prejudice and persecutionary reasons. It's not just buildings that were destroyed. People's lives were, obviously. And Your Honours will have the opportunity of hearing in the course of this trial from Darfuris themselves. And you will assess, of course, what has hit me every time I've interacted with Darfuris, and actually survivors throughout the world, is their dignity and remarkable resilience. This can be expressed in many different ways, but the clip I'm going to show you from a BBC Panorama documentary called The New Killing Fields in November 2004 shows but one example of a very dignified and collected lady who's endured awful things already. And I'd ask you to watch out. You'll hear two words in this clip in Arabic. It's the subtitle underneath it, Abid, Abid. You'll hear it in the openings of my learned friends that follow me. Abid meaning slave. And the feeling that she enunciates, that because she's black, she's viewed as less by those that were targeting her. Her life did not have value. And that reason alone, the color and the ethnicity, was a reason to extinguish life from her and her communities. And perhaps that Panorama documentary clip could be played now. Thank you.
They were saying the blacks are slaves, the blacks are stupid, catch them alive, tie them up, take them away with you. They would say, kill them. They were terrorizing our people.
Matters did not abate, and people fled, internally in Sudan, but also in refugee camps. For example, in Chad. And the next clip, in fact, is from the Tulum refugee camp on the border of Sudan, but inside of Chad. And many that will be watching these proceedings around the world, but a good number of them will be in those camps even today. And I'd ask that that clip please be played.
Just inside the Chadian border, Sudanese refugees struggle to return a semblance of normality to their shattered lives. Lives that were traumatized by war must now be rebuilt in the unfamiliar surroundings of a foreign land. These people are just a few of the victims of the Darfur crisis, a conflict whose roots lie in the culture of war and impunity that has plagued Sudan for decades.
So gradually the murmurings that had been heard around the world and the whispers that something was not right, the broadcasts that journalists had brought to international attention, finally started penetrating even the corridors of power, even the highest echelons of the United Nations. And in the clip that we'll show in a moment, we see the former late Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, on the 25th of June 2004, underlining that what was occurring appeared to be universal crimes, and that those that were committing them were put on notice that there would be accountability for what was taking place. Unfortunately, the dove of peace that you'll see on his lapel was really more a prayer. It didn't land in his lifetime, and it hasn't landed today. But I think this process and this trial, in addition to its core responsibility for Your Honours to assess the strength of evidence and whether or not liability is established, it is an important moment in trying to wake peace from its slumber and mobilize it into action. But perhaps that clip could be played. Thank you.
Secretary of State Powell's visit and mine will coincide, and we will be in Khartoum at least for one day together, where we will collectively be putting pressure on the government to do what it has to do. And of course, given the atrocities that has happened and the crimes that are being committed, these are universal crimes. And so the perpetrators ought to be put on notice that they will be held accountable, whoever they are.
Again, those words fell on deaf ears, and a few months later, 3 months later, the Security Council again became seized of the Sudan situation. And the next clip is from the British Permanent Representative, the then British Permanent Representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Emmy Jones-Parry. And he emphasizes that clearly there's widespread violations of international humanitarian law, that it emerged, that a commission of inquiry was required to establish the facts, and that violations of IHL required justice. And perhaps that could be played, please.
Mr. President, there have been many credible reports of widespread violations of international humanitarian law in Darfur. It is therefore right that this Council quickly set up an international commission of inquiry to establish the facts. There can be no impunity. Those guilty of serious violations of international humanitarian law or human rights must be brought to justice.
By this time, casting our mind back, the ripples of concern had become much more of a movement. Civil society was engaged, celebrities, actors, politicians, everybody in so many parts of the world realized action was needed. And many leaders, for example, the next clip is from the former foreign minister of Germany, Joschka Fischer, are highlighting, because there's no abatement, the time had come to ensure that those that were found guilty would be brought to justice and punished. And perhaps that bit could be played, please. There's no sound on this, but this was what was reported. Also of great significance is the fact that the UN Independent Commission of Inquiry has taken up its work of investigating the severe human rights violations in Darfur. Injustice must be exposed and criminals must be punished. The Commission of Inquiry gave its report in January 2005. Again, no abatement, no cessation of violence, and we see then within a couple of months, the end of February, 28th of February 2005, the High Commissioner for Human Rights herself, Louise Arbour, speaks to this very matter, and perhaps that clip could be played, please.
I was there last fall in Darfur myself. I visited all the 3 Darfurs. I met in every place. I met with the judges, the prosecutors, and so on, and I came away then with exactly, in my case, it was more an impression. In the case of the commission, it's much better documented. Same conclusion, that the local courts, the Sudanese courts, were either unwilling or unable to take it on. And the referral to the ICC, in my view, is the obvious choice of forum.
So there we are. Situation such, an unwillingness to stop, an unwillingness to comply with the norms of customary international law, or the basic requirements of international humanitarian law. And we have the High Commissioner for Human Rights realizing the ICC is a court of last resort, and that tragically, in her view, we had reached the end, that the only option was referral. And this brought the Council into action on the 31st of March 2005. And that's the last clip, which was, well, if that could be played, please.
So in 2005, the UN Security Council voted to have the International Criminal Court investigate.
So there we have it. Resolution 1593, the Security Council bound together what they did in 1992 in establishing the ICTY and 1994 the ICTR, in deciding that justice was an important aspect to maintain international peace and security, in referring this grave matter to this court. 11 countries voted in favor of that resolution. And if I may be permitted just to read those out. Argentina, Benin, Denmark, France, Greece, Japan, Philippines, Romania, the United Kingdom, Republic of Tanzania. And I think it's to the very great credit that the only permanent member of the Council that is not a state party, namely the Russian Federation, voted in favor of this referral. The Russian Federation in 2005 voted in favor of justice. And whilst Algeria, Brazil, China, and the United States abstained, in their statements, they spoke in favor of the court. No country, not one, voted against this resolution. So I think it was clear from any vantage point, that the referral was thought a very good thing to get to the truth and to try to improve the situation. Over these 17 years, I think the victims I've spoken to, even before I became prosecutor, have had really remarkable patience, and very often I find an unbelievable belief that justice would come, even in moments when it seemed an absolutely vain hope. In my view, Madam President, Your Honours, this trial will begin to vindicate the decision of the Security Council to refer this matter to Your Honours and to this court. Now, if I may be permitted to zoom in a little bit on the case regarding Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman. Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman, also known as Ali Kushaib, was a member of the Janjaweed. And one of the cornerstones of this, the brutal counterinsurgency campaign that the Sudanese government embarked upon was by relying hand in glove, in cahoots, with the Janjaweed or Arab militia. Now, the word Janjaweed comes from two root words in Arabic, jinn, which is the hidden or the unseen, and jawad, which is horse. And in common parlance, very often Janjaweed are referred to as devils on horseback. They were known, their signature movement was riding horses or camels, and coming in very frequently in morning attacks, very often at dawn, attacking villages, killing and destroying, and committing some of the crimes that are alleged in the charges before you. One witness recalls a morning, a little bit later, not at the morning prayer, but it's about 9 o'clock, witness 007. And witness 007 says this: at about 9 o'clock, 0900 hours, the Janjaweed and government soldiers attacked the town from the east. I was in my house with my wives and children when they arrived. The Janjaweed were on horseback and camelback. Some of the Janjaweed were on foot. They started firing randomly. And during the course of the trial, the prosecution members of this team, and perhaps others, will ask these witnesses what effect that had on them. What was the effect? What was the trauma, if any, that experience by itself, even before we get to killings and rapes and destruction of property, what did that have? What effect did that have? These morning attacks, when you're woken from your slumber or interrupted in your prayers, what effect did it have or does it have on them? Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman, the prosecution says, one of the key senior Janjaweed militia leaders that the government of Sudan relied upon heavily, that they worked with closely. He was, the prosecution say, a willing and knowing participant in crimes, and indeed you'll see, not by way of rhetoric, but from the actions and the evidence that will be led, you will see that he took pride in the power that he thought he exerted and the authority that he had, and a strange glee in a feared reputation. You will hear evidence, Your Honours, that his forces and himself rampaged across different parts of Darfur, Wadi Salah, Mukhjar localities in West Darfur, inflicting severe pain and suffering on women and children and men in the villages that he left in their wake or displaced, and in also Kudum, Bendizi, Mukhjar and Delig, and my colleagues, learned friends after me will address you on those. The attacks really were against the four people, the four villages, their places, and the executions, the sexual gender-based crimes, the crimes against children, and the underlying persecutory intent in so much of this really is the bedrock underpinning this case, and is brought to life in some way at least, however imperfectly, in the 31 counts that Your Honours will determine in due course. Rape was frequently and deliberately inflicted. It wasn't the odd individual committing criminality. It is clear it was deliberately inflicted as part of the attacks against the civilian population. One witness you'll hear said it was very common. But an example of it, and an example of the consequences of it, in any culture, anywhere in the world, but in Darfur, will be brought to life by P0015. And that witness will say, and I quote, "Some of the women and girls who were raped during the conflict attempted suicide." She adds, and I quote, "In my community, a girl who has been raped has no value." And we see this very often. The individual is targeted, and particularly with the crime of rape, they're targeted and have this crime inflicted upon them immediately in the situation. But it has a consequence that is well known in different cultures, that the victim is then far too frequently ostracized, separated, and cut asunder even from the wider family. The same witness describes that how during an attack on Bendizi, that one Janjaweed member came literally on his high horse and forcibly picked up a girl of 15 years of age, put her on the back of the horse and rode away. She describes also that the Janjaweed and Asakia, and Asakia, you'll hear in the course of the trial, are used to denote those members of the security forces or law enforcement personnel of Sudan that are wearing uniforms, that they had pre-selected between 10 to 15 girls and women. And she says that they took them to a location, and then I think what comes next should be read verbatim. with your leave, Madam President. The witness says the Janjaweed and Asakir tore off the inner clothes of these girls and women so that by the time the girl and women were on the ground, she was naked. And the witness continued that in the case of young girls, they were held down by one of them while another worked on her. Worked being, the witness's own terminology. She continues that if the victim seemed strong or resisted, she was held down by two instead of one. One by the legs and another by the chest, and a third worked her. The man working, a euphemism for raping, and that's clear in the evidence that you'll hear. The man raping raised up his jalabia, took off his underwear, and then raped. Madam President, in this witness's account that you will hear, and your honours will hear, the women and girls being raped, that 10 to 15 group, down by where groundnuts were being kept, included a mother and her two daughters. And all the girls that were raped were between 15 to 18 years of age. All of the girls raped were between 15 to 18 years of age. They had so much to look forward to before the events that were inflicted upon them. And the sole exception to those between 15 to 18 was one mother of two girls who was about 30 or 40 years of age. Madam President, unfortunately there's many accounts of this, and we will do our best efforts, given where we are in proceedings, to highlight cases of sexual gender-based crimes to the best of our ability, so your honours can determine relevance and the responsibility of Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman, and also understand the depth of suffering that has been caused. Not even infants were spared brutality in the attacks in Khartoum and Benghazi. One witness describes that on the attack on the 16th of August 2003, another woman called Fatma had a baby on her back. A Janjaweed on horseback asked her to put it down, and she refused. And when he took the baby and lifted the child, the little infant up, and saw it was a boy, he threw the child in the air, and it landed about a meter, perhaps a meter and a half from where the witness was standing. She'll describe, and I quote in fact her statement, that when the child hit the ground, he laid there without breathing. An old woman picked him up and he started breathing slowly. All the women started shouting for help and were saying, "God help me." Within Mukhjar, you will hear in the course of the opening and throughout the trial a tale of woe and despair and hardship within the cramped, squalid confines of the Mukhjar police station, and you'll hear evidence from multiple witnesses how they had to squat almost cheek to jowl. They had to defecate where they stood or where they squatted. They were not, it was very hot and overcrowded, and the stench was overwhelming. One witness put it in this manner, and I quote, "People were stacked on top of each other. They were fur with black skin, just crammed into the cell. The cell had hardly any air, and it was very hot." And another witness describes that it wasn't just a random Janjaweed. It wasn't just uniformed members of the Sudanese security forces that were inflicting these conditions on them. It was, the witnesses say, Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman, Ali Kushayb himself. He was not remote he was an active participant. And one witness, P0919, describes that whilst at that station, Ali Kushaib was beating the umdas, the elders. And you'll hear quite some evidence of that the elders being particularly targeted as if to break the will, the honor, and the cohesion of the community. Another witness described how Ali Kushaib's men forcibly shaved, I should say, 2 detainees with knives to the scalp, thereby injuring them. And he watched and saw 3 detainees have their ears cut off in front of his eyes. Their ears fall to the ground, and profuse bleeding, of course, naturally occurred. He says, the witness says that he didn't know what happened to those 3, but states he didn't see them later. The detainees were just crying because it was unbearable, and Ali Kushaib then left the cell. The prosecution say he was there. He was not passive, but an active participant. And unfortunately for P919, he was not a spectator to the misery of others. He didn't only have the misfortune to see those beatings, those ears being cut off, but he himself had a hot iron taken to his skin as part of an interrogation, and he was burnt. And he will describe in the course of this trial, Madam President, how the Abu Taira, who are a organized Central Reserve Force of the government of Sudan, tried to interrogate him and ask him about the Tora Bora, the rebels, and he said he didn't even know what the Tora Bora were. He didn't even know that phrase meant rebels. And he was terribly treated, and he says many others in that cell were inflicted with that hot iron, and they had burns, either on their shoulders, on their thighs, or on their back. And in the course of this trial, Madam President, you will see some of these burns. You will see some of the marks that the prosecution alleged Ali Kushaib, Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman, sitting in this courtroom, inflicted with his axe on the precious skin of the witnesses that you will see and hear about. There was a wanton disregard for basic humanity. We've heard, and you will hear in the course of this trial, examples of deliberate targeting. We've talked about rapes, but deliberate targeting of umdas, the senior members, the leaders of the community. And there's an example the witness 0129 will give, that he was sitting and he was hit with the handle of Mr. Ali Kushaib's axe. We were sitting on the floor and he was hitting us. And there was an umda, Yahya, an elderly Fur leader, and there was a small child sitting next to Umda Yahya. And when Ali Kushaib brandished his cold axe and it hit Umda Yahya, it either intentionally or recklessly also hit that child. That was not, of course, the only child victim in Mukhjar. In a really chilling episode, Your Honours will hear evidence of a roadside execution where it said the accused ordered the killing of 5 children aged between 10 to 12 and also their religious teacher. This is witness P0905, who describes that there was a sheikh who were students in his khalwa, his Quranic school. And when the Janjaweed came and Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman came, they were shaking. His words were, the young ones, they were scared. They were shaking. And this sheikh said, I am not scared of death. You can kill me. But these 5 children, they are poor. They are my responsibility, and they're orphans. And despite that, Your Honours will hear evidence that those children were shown no mercy, but were killed. The Sheikh saw that and knew he was going to be next, and asked if he could say 2 rakats of wafil, 2 rakats of prayer, 2 movements of prayer. Witness 905 explains that he was permitted by Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman to perform those 2 rakats of prayer, and then continues, and I quote, "The religious man, he finished his 2 rakats, he finished his prayer, they finished with him." Your Honours, there's so many examples of abuse, not just using his axe, not just killing people or ordering the execution of children or men, allowing rapes and participating in all of the allegations that are charged and are before you, but just really beastly abuse. An example is given by P976 regarding detention in Mukhjar, and Umda Yahya Ahmad Zarruq's name was called in the presence of the accused. The Umda Yahya Ahmad Zarruq came forward, and the evidence you will hear is that Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman called him, Ali Kushaib called him a criminal, to which the Umda just had the temerity or the honour to shake his head. And because of that, it seems Ali Kushaib struck him on his head with an axe. The Umda fell to the ground, understandably perhaps, unable to stand. And as Ali Kushaib, as Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman was walking past, he pulled his ears, this aged Umda's ears, and said, "I'm going to ride the donkey. I'm going to ride the donkey." This dehumanizing, debasing, unacceptable treatment was not limited, of course, to Mukhjar. It's seen in almost all of the locations. P907 describes how in Delage, men were lying on the ground on their stomachs in front of the police station in a square, and that he was also asked to lie down. When one detainee said to Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman, "Who are you to force us to lie down supine on the ground?" Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman answered, "I'm the one in charge here. I do whatever I want," and struck the detainee with his axe. The witness describes the bleeding, and also that Ali Kushaib, not sufficient perhaps to be standing and them lying, literally trod on their rights, trod on their dignity by treading on their backs. And that's not just a lone witness. Witness 0671 also saw Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman standing on some prisoners and kicking them. Deliberate, targeted, debasing treatment to humiliate, to break will. The witness 907 stated, "I have never heard about such treatment. No one does that anywhere in the world." The impact on children really can't be emphasized enough, Madam President, Your Honours. We've seen examples or heard examples already in my opening regarding infants assaulted in Bindizi, how children were shot and killed in Mukhjar. But I think if I may be permitted just to highlight a few examples of the very real trauma, heartbreak and anguish that we say the conduct of this accused wrought deliberately on these children. P0955 was about 15 years of age at the time. Sudanese, Darfuris, like most kids in the world, love soccer. They love football. But instead of having memories of playing football with his friends and having a normal life that his family would have expected, he describes seeing his father detained in a vehicle after he was arrested in Delish. Perhaps knowing or sensing what was to come, he states this, and I quote, "My father looked over in my direction, made eye contact with me. On seeing me, he became emotional, and we both started crying. That would be the last time I was able to see my father alive." Another witness, P0714, gives a vivid account in my submission, and your Honours will hear it for yourselves, regarding fleeing from his home in Taringa in 2003. After the Azan was called, the call to prayer, before Fajr prayer time, he states this, "I was in bed and my father was awake and washing to prepare for prayers. The call to prayer was always around 4 a.m. and this was happening when I heard gunshots. My father shouted to the family to get up. I came out of our home and saw flames around the village. I heard people screaming and shouting and saw them running in our direction. The gunshots appeared to be coming from many directions. I was scared, and it was a chaotic situation. I saw the Janjaweed firing their weapons, and I escaped and heard the gunfire." But like many, and almost every witness will have a story, Madam President, Your Honours. In the immediate aftermath, the terror didn't stop, because the witness then states, fleeing for his life, "We stayed in the mountain for about 2 weeks and survived on some flour that had been brought along. For the 2 weeks in the mountain, I heard continuous gunfire around the area." And the longer-term damage is also synthesized and brought into stark relief by this witness, because he states very clearly, and I quote, "Because of the conflict and insecurity in my area, I could not continue my education further." So those that think, whilst the temporal scope of the charges may not be expansive, the consequences have been extremely expansive. They continue for far too many right to the present day. One mother, P011, describes this reality because of criminality, the prosecution say, because of the knowing and deliberate actions of the accused in this case, along with others. This witness had to flee. And she says, and I quote, "The conflict in Darfur is also split up my family. Now my mother and son are in Darfur, whilst I am in Chad. I'm constantly thinking about them, and I'm only able to communicate through the Red Cross system, which is very slow. It is also very painful to see your relatives humiliated and detained for no reason. I know I have to be brave in the refugee camp to cope with life. Otherwise, I lose everything." Another witness, P671, a teenage boy, again, a child, describes the lasting, pervasive trauma of seeing his father and other brother arrested in Delish, and then finding their executed bodies on the ground and then burying them. Nobody, and certainly no teenage boy, should have to endure that in the submission of the prosecution. The witness states, and I quote, "The images I saw stay with me and cause me severe nightmares. I try not to think about what happened to my brother and father, but when I do, it makes me extremely sad." And this story is replicated. They're samples, they're specimens of a much wider issue of the various communities, and many of those individuals grew up in refugee camps like the Khalma camp and others. Your Honours, this is not, in my respectful submission, a complicated case. It's not a case of command responsibility where the military superior or civilian, the military commander or the military superior is far removed from the battlefield. It's a case where there is a multiplicity of evidence from different sources that the accused killed, he ordered, he encouraged a full range of crimes, the full range of crimes that are before your honours. He participated and he ordered. It seems his defence is, it's not me. And when you hear in a moment my learned friend Julian Nichols will say, you'll hear some additional arguments that will be presented in the course of the trial. Additional evidence will be foreshadowed that will be led. And your honours will determine whether or not that is a true position or an insult to the truth. Witness after witness saw him, heard him, recognized him. Witness after witness knew Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman from before. This is, the prosecution say, a strong case. But we are confident that when you have heard all the evidence and assessed the submissions and questions from the defence, you will be satisfied so that you're sure that you'll be able to convict Mr. Abd-Al-Rahman. I'm very cognizant, Madam President, Your Honours, that here we are in our robes, thousands of miles away from Darfur, with wonderful technology in front of us, in a new court building. And this seems very alien. This seems very far removed, and it is, in truth, very far removed, in every sense of the world, from the reality that many Darfuri victims, survivors, are living in today, either in refugee camps in Chad, or internally displaced people in Sudan, or the diaspora trying to assimilate as best they can as foreigners fleeing in their life from different countries. But at the same time, with your leave, Madam President, I wish to emphasize that they're not forgotten. I think they are very much in our collective mind's eye today. And I'm confident that they will be heard and they will be listened to by your honours. And your honours will see what took place through their eyes and objectively. And after hearing all the evidence, in my respectful submission, there will be only one outcome. This is really the end of my part of the opening speech. Perhaps I can just outline the structure. Senior Trial Attorney Julian Nichols will present next on the identity of the accused. I think each of my learned friends for the prosecution will take about 30 to 40 minutes. He will be followed by Mr. Edward Jeremy, who will discuss and present two topics: the contextual elements of war crimes and crimes against humanity, and then secondly, the accused's position of authority and influence. He will be followed by Miss Melissa Sims, who will join us after the break. She'll present the crimes committed in Khartoum and Benghazi and the surrounding environs. And then Mr. Pubadu Sachithanandan will speak to two issues: crimes in Mukhjar and its surrounding areas, and charges of persecution in relation to all of the charged episodes, whether it's Khartoum, Benghazi, Mukhjar or Dalij. And then finally, Miss Alison Whitfield will present on the crimes in Dalij and surrounding areas. In my respectful view, this situation, this case that your honours are going to hear, that Madam President you will preside over, is precisely the type of situation, precisely the kind of case for which this International Criminal Court was created. In my respectful submission, this is precisely the kind of situation that the Security Council should have referred, and they should be proud that they did in furtherance to the UN Charter. With the bringing and starting of this case, and by the end of this trial, I'm confident that the first few drops of justice will land on what has hitherto been a desert of impunity in Darfur. With that, with your leave, I would like to cede the floor to Mr. Julian Nichols. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Khan. In fact, with perfect timing, we've reached the break, and so we'll take the break now and sit again at 11:30 when Mr. Nichols can take
Thank
it.
you so much.
Thank you very much. Yes.
All rise.